Hello my friends, we have some of the interesting news coming from the Engels airfield, where Russia bases their strategic aviation. Before the strikes on Ukraine, they send those bombers to Engels, they refuel those, they put some of the missiles and bombs, but just yesterday during this process, Ukrainian drones visited the area. And we have the confirmation, those kabooms. Well, I told you about them already in yesterday's update, but today we have an official report of what exactly was kaboomed there. And according to Ukrainian officials, it was the Russian Tupolev 95 aircraft, at least a single one, that has been destroyed by Ukrainian security service at Engels airfield. It was used for missile attack on Ukraine. The airfield is about 800 kilometers away from Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine, fantastic strikes. So one more irreversible loss for the Russian military, for the Russian Air Force, or as they call those, airspace forces. And why irreversible? Because Russia cannot longer produce those, I would say, even ancient aircraft Tupolev 95. Well, Russia lost all of the technologies. Those disappeared with the previous, more advanced civilization, I would say, compared to the current Russia, I mean Soviet Union. So all of the bombers like Tupolev 222M3, Tupolev 160, Tupolev 95, Russia just cannot produce, design. They might just upgrade those. Russians install new electronics, instruments, guidance systems, navigation. Russia still may develop some of the missiles, but speaking about production of the new platform, new strategic bomber that might launch the cruise missiles, which might carry nuclear warheads, well, it doesn't exist for Russia any longer. They lost it, as I mentioned, and Ukraine harms Russian even nuclear capabilities. Russians lost at least 30% of their strategic bombers, well, mainly because of the spiderweb operation and also because of the Ukrainian strikes sometimes happening in Russian strategic military airfields. And what is interesting in this case that I haven't seen the Russian air defense in operation. Just some of the machine guns, Kalashnikovs as usual, but where is the freaking air defense? Russians. Because Russians cannot protect their military bases. Even the Kerch part of the Crimean Peninsula is under the constant strikes. And there is the Kerch Bridge, by the way. Yeah, shit happens with the Russian vessels in the Black Sea. Yeah, today it was a Black Sea in addition to the Azov, where the ships were hit before, and Magyar again publishes a new video. So Taman, Anapa, this is the Kerch Strait here and occupied Crimea. You might see the geolocation of all of the vessels, and this is the port of Novorossiysk. Ukraine hunts mostly tankers, sometimes cargo vessels, but for today especially those were mostly cargo ships which were hit by Ukrainian drone operators. Oh, this is the exit emergency boat, which they, like sailors, should have used, but they didn't do it. Yeah, this is the cargo ship. It is very well visible. It was hit as well. And on a video that I showed you before, filmed from another ship, well, Russia also hit sometimes tankers operating from Ukrainian ports and cargo ships too, but the scale of the Russian attacks is way lower compared to Ukrainian drone strikes. So Russia lost since the 6th of July 159 of the vessels, including tugboats and tankers. 159, that's a lot, guys. I wonder if it is even the scale of the losses for some of the sides during the Second World War, or this loss is even bigger. And the main thing for Ukraine is not to put those vessels on the bottom, but to disable their operations. Well, sometimes ships are completely gone. Depends, because there could be fire on board, and for those small tugboats, I guess the strike of FP1, FP2 drones could be devastating. And what I also discovered in this video, that Ukraine implemented a machine vision on FP1 and FP2 drones, so the automatic guidance is there, and that makes drones more precise and less vulnerable to the electronic warfare or some of the distortions close to the ground, but they operate with the satellite connections. FP1, FP2. Fantastic job by Ukrainian SBS, so Ukrainian drone army, Magyar. They're just awesome. My friends, before we continue, I'm calling you to press like to this video just right now while you're watching it. And also subscribe for the channel. It matters a lot, my friends. You're boosting my content in algorithms if you are doing those two simple actions. And also, if you can, you may of course support my job on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description right below, or join membership of the YouTube channel by pressing button join if you watch me on YouTube, of course. My friends, you're just awesome, you're amazing, and thank you for making my job possible. Now, let's continue with the video. Alright, what we have here is the new compilation of the Kharkiv group and how they perform their operations against Russian logistics, kabooming Russian military vehicles, their supply trucks. Yeah, sometimes you have a distortion. Russians also have electronic warfare, but it still allows Ukrainian drone operators to fly. And you see, despite distortions, like if the machine vision is locked on the target, the distortions, they do not matter in this case. That's the important. So we see this signal because it was transmitted to Ukrainian drone operator. So we see those distortions. But machine sees very clear picture and it follows the target automatically. So all of those jams, they're not working in this case for disturbing the machine itself. That's why this technology is really important to be introduced elsewhere, and also, as you saw on FP1, FP2 drones, it opens new opportunities for Ukrainian drone operators to kaboom the targets very precisely, very effectively. And here is the example. So the image is dropping, distortions, maybe because of the long range, not just electronic warfare, but drone made it to the target. Yeah, so Fedorov's reforms, they are working, as we see, what he was capable to introduce to Ukrainian army, those new drones, new technologies, new companies that went on the market producing those components, cooperation with our Western partners, all of that is done by the ex-defense minister of Ukraine. Well, partially it was done before, but he upscaled it and introduced reforms in a very short term. He was really an innovative Ukrainian official, talented one, but he's gone. Yeah, I continue to tell about it because those are still the top news and still protests are continuing in Ukraine. And again, this evening, I will record one more video because I just saw the stream of Sternenko. He is the biggest Ukrainian volunteer, a drone volunteer, and he recorded, wow, that video put so much light, negative light on Syrsky, and yeah, it's time to tell about that butcher, really the butcher, and he should not be just dismissed, he should be prosecuted. Yeah, with Syrsky, Ukrainian army will not win. But anyways, guys, it's the regular update, so let's review the situation in general. Right, guys, now let's go to the front lines. We have the information about the Ukrainian successful counterattack near Pidubna. So actually, this is the most profitable direction for Ukrainian army right now. Kamar direction, Ukrainian forces are getting closer to the settlement, and recently, well, there was the small group of the Russian forces in Andriivka-Klivtsova village. It was still in a gray zone because of it. Nevertheless, Ukraine left it behind and continued to propel forward towards Zelenyy High, Novohadske, Grushivsky, where Ukrainian infantry was spotted before. But finally, Ukraine managed to clear those Russian forces, firstly with the help of the drones. We have the video published by Ukrainian drone operators. So the dugout was destroyed, but partially Russians survived, and they've decided to surrender to Ukrainian armed forces. This is the proper decision. So those guys were imprisoned by Ukrainian infantry in this place. So I would even color this village in fully blue area because Ukraine was successful in clearing the last foothold of the Russian forces. But for now, on the maps of Maiko 7.3 Analyst, it's still in a gray area. I'm using this map all the time to get familiar with the situation on the front lines, and the link for the video of this analyst that is doing this map you may find in the video description right below. About the situation in Konstantinivka, well, there is still the presence of Ukrainian army in the central part of Konstantinivka. Russia still has not managed to occupy the city despite on what Putin proclaimed before, and Ukrainian defenders continue to defend this important city. But there are just small infantry groups of Ukraine. The evacuation of the forces with the transport, it's not possible, maybe just with unmanned robotic vehicles, and of course it creates huge risks for those who are wounded. The situation is similar to what it was in Pokrovsk direction. Pokrovsk-Mirnograd, it was like the bottleneck, and evacuation of Ukrainian forces was not possible, and on the way out Ukraine lost lots of the vehicles there. between Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. I told about it in my updates. Well, here it's similar kind of the situation because Russia controls this road with the help of the drones. But Ukraine also drops aviation gliding bombs to hit Russian positions, which they took in Konstantinivka itself. Ukraine works also with the drones, so Konstantinivka itself is boiling, but it's early to say about full occupation of the city. If some analyst is telling you that it's been occupied, this analyst is pro-Russian. And we have the confirmation of the presence of the Ukrainian armed forces in the southern part of Konstantinivka, which is still in a gray zone. So Russians are trying to advance from Bereztok. I have this information from one of the analysts. Playfra, he has published this map with the confirmation, more proof of continued Ukrainian presence in Konstantinivka, even in the southernmost outskirts of the city. And here we have the link for the map of his with the confirmation. I wonder how to watch the image itself with the presence of the Ukrainian army. I just need to click and there is the visual confirmation, the link to the Telegram source. But anyways, there is the proof, let's say. This one and this one, some of the ruined buildings with Ukrainian infantry inside. I hope that they'll have the chance to leave positions at the proper time, because Russians have lots of the attack attempts directly to the city itself. But it also means that this southern part is not being controlled by Russia. They're just some of the flag operations of the small Russian infantry groups in Konstantinivka. And that is interesting, as for me, I didn't expect for Ukraine to resist that long in the settlement itself, because for Russia it's easier to move with those small infiltration attacks in the urban environment. Well, at the same time, Russia has started the attack in the northern part of the Kharkiv region towards Kazachia Lopan. So Ukraine tries to stop a Russian offensive, but Russian infantry made it to this kind of the big settlement. We have the confirmation from Mykolaiv and also by Playfra, who shares the information that Russians went from Kharkiv towards Kazachia Lopan. It was their attack, and here we have his explanation. Kazachia Lopan sector, Kharkiv Oblast. In the past weeks, the situation worsened quite a bit for the Ukrainians, who were not able to fully stabilize the situation. The Russians infiltrated along the marked routes, and as of time of writing, they were able to reach at least 60% of Kazachia Lopan. Ukrainians continue to work with FPVs on Russian positions. Ukrainians reinforced this area with certain units. For now, I won't name them. Okay. It's interesting to know that Russian FPVs are not working anywhere over Kazachia Lopan. That's strange. Leaving almost complete freedom of movement to Ukrainian supplies, but it's possible that the Ukrainians are also almost entirely focused on Kazachia Lopan itself. In general, the situation is still in course of development. Now revisit it in some time again. So again, Playfra, great analysis. So that's why I have my Twitter account, my friends, because I follow those analyses mostly, and I retweet some of the information on my page and also publish my videos there and some of my posts, but kind of rarely. So mainly I use Twitter to consume the information and later on to present it for you, like gathering and giving for you with my own comments. Am I a news aggregator in this case? I'm not sure. Well, the good thing that, as Playfra says, Ukrainian forces are capable to send supplies and Russians are in lack of FPV drones or FPV drone units. Nevertheless, they try to go to Kazachia Lopan. In this case, because the war is about supplies, I don't think that Russians will stay for long in this settlement. Alright, the southern part of Zaporizhzhia, Kamenska direction, there Ukraine is under the Russian artillery attack, it seems like, but Ukraine moved ahead a little behind this crossroad. Yeah, Russians shared those videos that Ukraine moved ahead, and yeah, unfortunately there is the fire, but it shows the presence of the Ukrainian army further away from Stepnogorsk, it seems like. We're not sure what was hit exactly there, with what Russia operates, maybe FPV drones or something, maybe artillery. It looks like an artillery fire, by the way. Not the FPV drones, and I wonder, was it a precise fire? It doesn't look like that, so they don't show the evidence. The drone was flying from the very far distance. Maybe Russians afraid to lose this surveillance drone. It was flying over the Dnipro River, but on the Russian-controlled territory, temporarily controlled. It's kind of interesting. It means that Ukraine is moving a little forward in this direction. But whether that move is successful or not, it's hard to tell. Well, there are some of the forest patches where Ukrainian infantry might hide, and later on proceed forward, maybe in parallel with this road, because there is also one more forest line. But Ukraine mostly operates with the drones. There are some of the counterattack operations, and some of them are ending not so well, and this evening I'm gonna tell you about one failed Ukrainian operation in Pokrov's direction of the Ska-la Brigade, the Syrsky favorite brigade, and how they basically ruined themselves. Yeah guys, sorry, not all of the time there are positive news, but now we live in this timeline, okay? Quite pessimistic as for me. Alright, also in Zaporizhzhia direction, before I saw that Russians went from Gulay-Pole to Vozdvizhenka, but now there is the presence of the Ukrainian infantry. So Russians went there, they put their flags, but Ukrainian infantry made the counterattack to dismantle Russian infantry, and this situation is happening all the time. Let's click and check out the status. So the confirmation of the Ukrainian forces, Ukrainian infantry in the village, they cleared the positions, demolishing the Russian army in the place. Alright, great. And also we have this map with the vectors, so Russians went there, but they were cancelled. One more attack attempt happened south from the same village, we'll see how it goes. But this vector was reported before, maybe it's the same group. Oh, the Russian military blogger Ilya Remeslov finally was detained for the second time because he said something against Putin, and before he was released, he spent several months out of prison, and today he was arrested again. He's been incriminated in fakes, spreading the fakes against the Russian army and the Russian supreme commander, probably. So he might get few years in prison, and he blamed Putin himself about the bad situation in Russia and the bad situation in the war against Ukraine. And the guy who recently accused Putin in the same things, Lunin, who wanted to meet Putin and record some of the video with him, that should be broadcasted, and he said that there are the guys in the Russian army behind him who would dismantle the Russian regime if Putin wouldn't listen them, and they will take control over Russia. Well, he stopped complaining. Well, first of all, he was arrested and released after 11 days, and now he says that he has a car. He says, look, I have a new car. He says it's my service vehicle. I'm in Borodin team, so there are elections soon in Russia, those political parties, so maybe one of the political party, which is also pro-Putin's regime, like they're all the same. They're just different on a paper, but in general all of the members of parliament, they support the current Russian vector and Putin. Putin has the sole power in Russia, so they just bribed this guy for him not to tell different stuff, and he stopped complaining, absolutely. But later on, I think this car might go kaboom. For some of the reason, I don't know, because Russian regime never forgives those kind of the traitors, as they say, who threat the current government, their regime, and we saw it already in Spain with this helicopter pilot who left Russia, yeah, and this guy, well, he says everything as Prigozhin, and we know what happened to Prigozhin. Alright, Noel Report shares the information from Axios that Senate sanctions bill targeting Russia now has support from at least 61 senators. And that's a lot, including 39 Republicans and 22 Democrats. Enough to overcome filibuster, the legislation would allow the United States president to impose 100% tariffs on the 5 largest buyers of Russian oil and gas, including China, India, and also targets Russia's shadow fleet. The bill still be brought to vote. Well, it's up to Donny. I would say even without this bill, like, it just allows Donald Trump to decide whether to apply sanctions or not. The bill itself is not automatically imposes those sanctions. In the first redaction of the bill it was like that, but later on deceased Lindsey Graham changed it, because Donald Trump didn't agree with the first redaction, and they tried to propose the second variant and the third variant, but it took so much time, and finally they have the votes. Well, we'll see. They still need to bring it to a vote. Well, at the same time, Russian stocks are continued to plummet down. Also Gazprom and others energy companies. And that's the result of the Ukrainian kinetic sanctions and more sanctions applied by our partners. But Ukrainian sanctions, I would say they're the most profitable. Well, we're not saying about the total collapse of the Russian stock market or Russian economy just right now, but the trend is visible. It continued to stagflate despite still high oil prices on the market, which are rising once again because of the new spiral of the confrontation in the Middle East. Alright, Ukrainian Hur says that Putin wants to increase the strikes on Ukrainian cities, especially Sumy, Kharkiv, Kiev and other cities. Putin gave the direct task for the Russian army to make living in those cities miserable and even not possible, including the capital city of Kiev. And also Russia increases the strikes on Ukrainian energy infrastructure and gas stations. For example, just yesterday I spoke with Kellen Robertson, and he mentioned me that he even spectated how one of the shells hit the gas station on the way. He was returning from the eastern part of Ukraine and Russia hit almost all of the gas stations there. So for Ukraine, it's the problem to increase supply logistics shoulder to supply its army with fuel now. Because military, they also use regular gas stations. In Ukraine and Russia and occupied territories, Russians use those stations and Ukraine also strikes those. So it's the modern day war, the war against enemy supplies. And unfortunately, guys, the war in Ukraine will continue for many more years because Putin understands the signals happening within Ukraine, Ukrainian government, and this chaos that basically was created by Zelensky as the motivation for Putin to continue the escalation against Ukraine. So Putin thinks that he can win. Well, I don't think like that. I think that after all, Russian regime will collapse. But Putin now has more of the chances to occupy more of the Ukrainian territories and maybe Donbass entirely. He'll have to spend lots of the infantry forces, but still Russia has more of that stuff compared to Ukraine, obviously, and Ukraine should use an asymmetrical tactics to compensate the lack in infantry. But it's not possible with Syrsky. Okay, it seems like Ukrainian Ska-la Brigade, they already have some of the proofs saying that Kozycha Lopan was liberated by them. Again, Ska-la Brigade is the favorite Syrsky Brigade, but there is a complete mess happening and today I'm gonna tell you why and how. Well, they have equipment, they have absolutely everything, but the attitude within this brigade, internal tortures, it's basically like the Wagner army. But they were successful in Kozycha Lopan, yes, and we have the confirmation about it. Okay, definitely we have the confirmation of their presence in Kozycha Lopan. But again, Ska-la, it's not about their fighters, okay? They're fine, but it's about the management of the Ska-la Brigade. And by the way, the commander of this brigade has been dismissed, he is under investigation. But those guys, they're brave, they do the task, but the attitude within the Ska-la Brigade, it's terrible. And there are lots of the people who try to escape from brigade, but if they got caught, they're usually cancelled. That's the attitude that Syrsky wants to propel in all of the Ukrainian army. Well, if that is true, the Kozycha Lopan that I already discussed in this video is back under Ukrainian control. The video of 425th Ska-la has just been published, so we'll see. Also, I need some of the detailed confirmation from our OSINTs, because, for example, in Pokrovsk direction, once it was a fake information shared by the same 425th, and I also told about it on my channel. Yeah, they showed the video from the Kursk operation filmed 1 year ago, proving that they have the presence in Pokrovsk. So here on this channel, I want to reach details, tell you really the truthful information. That's my goal, okay? This channel is still pro-Ukrainian, it's biased, I'm Ukrainian myself, but I want to tell only truth, because truth is our weapon against the Russian aggression and the Russian disinformation. And in Crimea, the situation is not getting better. The Russian appointed management tells that they cannot sell gasoline to anyone. They use just a limited amount of the fuel available for emergency services to operate. That's it. So the situation is the same, but the Kerch Bridge is still out there, but Russia cannot supply fuel with the sea routes any longer because Magyar cancelled most of the ships in Azov Sea. Right, my friends, it's all what I wanted to say in this video, and please support my job on Patreon. The link for it is in the video description right below, or join membership of YouTube channel by pressing button join, obviously if you can, if you are willing to support me in that way. If not, it's okay, just press like to this video and subscribe for the channel. My friends, you're the best, you're awesome. I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.